You are standing at the edge of a causeway. The stone beneath your feet is dressed sandstone, cut and fitted without mortar, and it runs straight ahead of you for 250 meters across a moat wider than most rivers you have crossed. The water on both sides reflects a sky that is already bright, even at this early hour. At the far end of the causeway, a gate. It is taller than anything in the city you came from. Behind it, 5 towers, arranged like a hand reaching upward, the central one climbing 65 meters into the morning air. You are not at the edge of a temple. You are at the edge of a world. And you arrived on the wrong side of it. The year is 900 CE. The Khmer Empire is in its 3rd century of existence, and the city that will later be called Angkor is still being built into its fullest form. The population of this urban complex at its peak exceeds 1 million people, making it the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. That number has been contested. The consensus, reached after a decade of aerial radar mapping conducted by the Cambodian Archaeological LiDAR Initiative between 2012 and 2015, is that the greater Angkor region supported somewhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million people across a settled area of roughly 1,000 square kilometers. The largest city in Europe at this moment holds perhaps 30,000. No European of this era would have had a word for a city this size. They had not yet imagined it. We walk forward. The causeway stones are warm already. On either side, the moat stretches in both directions until it bends out of sight. This is not decorative water. We will come back to that. For now, the gate is ahead of us, and beyond it, everything. The first zone is the approach. From the western entrance, before you reach the main temple complex, you pass through a gallery lined with bas-relief carvings that run, without interruption, for 800 meters along the inner walls. If you walked at a normal pace and looked at every panel, it would take you most of a morning. The carvings are not decorations. They are the state record of the civilization. Battles, processions, the judgment of the dead, the churning of the cosmic ocean. Every major episode in the Sanskrit cosmological tradition appears somewhere on these walls, alongside the specific military campaigns and court ceremonies of the Khmer kings. The scholars who have studied them most closely, including Vittorio Roveda, whose work in the 1980s and 1990s remains foundational for this period, have identified several panels that appear to reference historical events with enough specificity to serve as documentary sources for campaigns that left no written record. The carvers were not working from templates, they were working from observation. Stop at the panel that shows an army in procession. Look at the soldiers in the middle register. Their sandals are tied in a way that is specific to this region. Their weapons are identifiable as the weapons in use in the 9th and 10th centuries. The elephants in the panel are not generic elephants. They are Asian elephants, depicted with accurate anatomical detail, including the smaller ears that distinguish them from the African elephants that appear in Indian manuscripts imported to the court. Someone watched these elephants and then carved them. Someone watched the procession and then recorded it in stone that is still standing. We move now into the second zone, past the main gallery, through the second enclosure, and into the area northeast of the central towers, where the residences of the temple priests and their families occupied a warren of wooden structures that have not survived. The wood is gone. What remain are the stone foundations, the stone lotus ponds, and the drainage channels. The channels deserve your attention. Roland Fletcher, working at Angkor between 2000 and 2012 as part of the Greater Angkor Project based at the University of Sydney, found that the hydraulic infrastructure of the city was not simply impressive. It was the city, the network of canals, reservoirs, and distribution channels that spread across the Greater Angkor region, represented an engineering system capable of storing and distributing water across an area larger than modern metropolitan Los Angeles. The largest reservoir, the West Baray, holds approximately 47 million cubic meters of water. It was constructed by hand by an estimated 10,000 workers over an estimated 10 years, sometime around the late 9th or early 10th century. The earthen embankments that form its walls are still intact. The water is still there. Here is what that system made possible. The Mekong Basin receives intense seasonal rainfall. Without management, the wet season floods and the dry season fails. The hydraulic network at Angkor leveled that curve. It allowed for rice cultivation across multiple cycles per year. It fed the million-person city. When the system was functioning at full capacity in the 10th century, Angkor was producing an agricultural surplus that funded the construction of one of the most concentrated collections of monumental architecture in human history. The water is not background. The water is the city. We have been walking for an hour now. The sun is higher. The stone is beginning to radiate heat back at you. This is the climate of the Khmer Empire. Tropical, intense, nothing like the temperate zones where most of the history you learned in school took place. The people who lived and worked in this city moved differently than you do. They built for this heat. The galleries are oriented to catch the prevailing breeze. The covered walkways between structures are elevated to allow air to move beneath them. The pools that appear throughout the complex were not purely ritual. They were cooling. The city was engineered around the conditions of its location with the same precision as its temples were engineered around the conditions of the sky. We turn now into the third zone. This is the one that will require you to revise something. For most of the 20th century, Angkor Wat was understood primarily as a mortuary temple. The argument was architectural. The complex faces west, and in Khmer cosmological tradition, west is the direction of death. The main deity of the complex is Vishnu, who in this period was associated with cosmic endings and preservation. The bas-reliefs run in a counterclockwise direction, which is the direction of funerary circumambulation in Hindu ritual. The conclusion that most visitors arrived at, and that most guidebooks transmitted, was that Angkor Wat was built as a tomb, a monument to death and the afterlife. The stone counterpart to the Egyptian pyramid tradition. Eleanor Manica, an art historian whose 1996 study of the temple's measurements remains one of the most detailed analyses of the complex, found something in the numbers that did not fit the tomb interpretation. The distances between the western entrance and the central sanctuary, measured in Khmer units called hats, encode the astronomical periods of the Hindu cosmological calendar with a precision that is not accidental. Specifically, Manica identified that the architectural layout encodes the movements of the sun and moon across specific points in the temple at specific times of year, including the spring and autumn equinoxes, when the sun rises in perfect alignment with the central tower as seen from the western entrance. The temple is not primarily a tomb, it is a calendar. It is a cosmological instrument built at the scale of a city block, and the alignments were placed there deliberately by architects who understood the movements of the sky with a precision that had no equivalent in the Western world for another 4 centuries. The tourists who photograph Angkor Wat are photographing a calendar they do not know how to read. We are in the inner sanctuary now. The central tower is directly above us. In 900 CE, this space is active. There are priests, there are offerings, there is incense, and there is music, and there are dancers who perform ritual movements that have been documented in the bas-relief carvings, and whose forms persist with modification. In Cambodian classical dance to this day, the Zhou Da Guo, a Chinese diplomatic account written in 1296 CE by the envoy Zhou Da Guo, who spent nearly a year at Angkor, describes the central sanctuary as a place where the sacred and the political were inseparable, where the king performed rituals that aligned the state with the cosmos, and where the king's legitimacy was understood as literally astronomical. He was not a king who had the blessing of heaven. He was, in the Khmer understanding, the point where heaven and earth met. The tower above us is not a symbol of that claim. It is the physical location where the claim was enacted. There is one thing that does not appear anywhere in the bas-reliefs. We mentioned it in passing, and we have held it until now. There are no ordinary people. The carvings show armies and kings, gods and demons, court ceremonies and cosmic battles. They show specific enough detail that you can identify the textile patterns on the clothing of the elite figures, the jewelry, the weapons. But the 900,000 people who carried stone and dug canals and farmed the rice paddies and maintained the hydraulic system, they appear nowhere on these walls. The city that fed 1 million people is recorded in stone as if it were inhabited only by the powerful and the divine. This is not unique to Angkor. It is the universal logic of monumental art. The people who commissioned the carvings were the people who appear in the carvings. The accounting of who actually built the city is kept in a different kind of record. The labor estimates embedded in the stones themselves, the traces of tools, the evidence of organization that archaeologists reconstruct slowly from the outside by asking what it would have taken to quarry, transport, and place this amount of stone in this amount of time. The answer is tens of thousands of people over generations working in a system that was neither purely coerced nor purely voluntary. We do not have their names. We leave now the way we came, back through the second enclosure, back through the gallery of 800 meters of carved history, back across the causeway, back to the edge of the moat. From here, in the early afternoon light, the 5 towers of the central complex are reflected in the water below us. The reflection is precise. It was designed to be. The architects oriented the moat to produce this reflection at this angle at this time of day. You are not looking at an accident of geography. You are looking at a composed image, held still for 11 centuries, of a civilization that understood the world as something that could be ordered, measured, and made to mean something. Angkor will continue for another 5 centuries after this morning. The hydraulic system will begin to fail slowly, likely from a combination of overextension and the climate shifts of the 14th and 15th centuries. Brendan Buckley, working with the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory on tree ring data from the region, it found evidence of extended mega droughts in the early 15th century that would have placed the water management system under pressure it was not designed to handle. The city was not sacked. It was not burned. The population shifted south toward the coast toward trade routes that the sea had opened. The temples were not abandoned all at once. Some were maintained for decades after the royal court moved. The last inscription at Angkor Wat dates to 1627 CE. The jungle grew back slowly. It is still there. The channels they dug to feed 1 million people still hold water.